Let me ask you something before we start. Do you really know the person you sleep beside every night? I mean, really know them? Their past, their secrets, the versions of themselves they've buried long before you ever came into their life? Because I thought I did. I truly believed my wife was an open book, a loving, dependable, ordinary woman. And I bet that's what you think about your partner too. But what if one ordinary morning, officers show up at your door not because of you, but because they've found something in your backyard? Something buried. Something that shouldn't be there. And suddenly, everything you thought was true about the person you love begins to fall apart, piece by piece, memory by memory, lie by lie. This isn't just another mystery. This is my reality. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why I can't sleep anymore, why I no longer trust the woman I married, and why what they found in our garden changed my life forever. Stay with me. You're going to get the answer you came here for. But I warn you, it's not the answer you're expecting. Now, before we dive too deep, I want to speak to you directly. Not the thousands who clicked this video out of curiosity.
You.
The one sitting there with your screen glowing in the dark, maybe with a cup of coffee in your hand, scrolling through mystery stories thinking they could never be real. You're here because a part of you wonders, what if? What if the person I trust most is hiding something? What if all it takes is one small discovery to send everything spiraling? What if the story is the one that hits a little too close to home? So don't just watch this like it's fiction. Watch it like it could happen to you. Because until a few weeks ago, I thought this kind of thing only happened in podcasts and police reports. Then the officers came knocking. It started like any other suburban weekend. Sunlight bleeding through the blinds, birds chirping like they were trying too hard, and my wife humming in the kitchen as she cooked eggs just the way I liked them. Everything felt familiar, reassuring. We'd been married 7 years, long enough to build routines, but still young enough to keep surprising each other. Or so I thought. She was always calm, always in control. The kind of person who alphabetized the spice rack and sent handwritten thank you notes to neighbors for small favors. You know the type. On the surface, she was perfection. But if I've learned anything, it's this: perfection is the greatest disguise. And that morning, when she smiled at me over her coffee mug, I had no idea officers were already outside, preparing to unearth something that would split my world in half. We live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone waves politely but keeps to themselves. Retired couples with trimmed hedges, kids on bicycles, dogs barking in unison at 4 p.m. like they're part of some weird suburban choir. It's safe. Or, at least it used to be. That morning, there were 3 patrol cars lined up across from our house. At first, I thought they had the wrong address. But they didn't knock. They walked straight to the garden. My garden. The one my wife had been tending for the past year with an almost obsessive dedication. She always said digging in the dirt helped her feel grounded. I just thought it was her version of therapy. But as I looked out the window and saw officers with shovels and gloves, I knew something was wrong. Deeply, violently wrong. And then it hit me, the way she froze when she saw them. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like she had been expecting this moment for a long time. She didn't ask me what was happening. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, her eyes locked on the garden like it was holding a secret she thought she buried for good. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was scared of the police, but because I was scared of what my wife might have done. Or worse, what she had never told me. Now, before you jump to conclusions, let me make something clear. My wife isn't a killer. At least, I don't think she is. But secrets have weight. And when you bury them long enough, they don't stay buried. They fester. They rot. They grow roots that reach up through the soil and drag the truth back into the light. That's what was happening. Something was clawing its way out. And as much as I wanted to believe this was some sort of mistake, the look on her face told me otherwise. It wasn't just dread. It was memory. A terrible, haunted memory she had been running from for years. And now it was catching up. They wouldn't tell me what they were looking for. One of the officers just asked her name, her full name, including her maiden one. When she said it, I swear, I saw the younger version of her flicker in that moment. like she was trying to figure out who she needed to become to survive whatever was about to happen. And then they started digging. Not gently, not with care, but like they knew exactly where to go. Like someone had told them what was there. And all I could do was stand there, watching dirt fly, my heart pounding, while the woman I loved became a stranger before my eyes. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I question her more? Why didn't I notice anything before? But that's the thing. She never gave me a reason to. And when someone is good at hiding the past, they don't just lie to your face. They lie through affection, through routine, through the illusion of safety. And I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, especially after what we'd already been through. The miscarriages, the late-night hospital visits, the quiet grief that made us closer, even when it hurt. I thought those scars meant we had nothing left to hide. I was wrong. They were just the surface. And while we stood there, both of us silent, the officers pulled out something that made the lead detective step back and call for backup. That's when my blood went cold. Because you don't call for backup when you find trash or bones from a dead pet. You call for backup when you find something that changes everything. I appreciate you staying with me, really. Because this isn't the kind of story you just skim through and move on from. It pulls at you, doesn't it? Like something under your skin you can't quite scratch. So let me take you deeper, not just into what the officers found that day, but into the cracks that had been forming long before that moment. Because looking back now, it's so obvious that things weren't as perfect as I wanted them to be. It wasn't just the garden or the police, or whatever was pulled from the earth. It was in the details. The small, subtle shifts in my wife's behavior. The nights she would take long walks alone after dinner, her phone clutched tightly in her hand like she was waiting for a message that never came. The way she started locking her desk drawer when she never used to care who went through it. And even though I wanted to believe these things were just quirks, stress, hormones, seasonal depression, something deeper was brewing. I just didn't want to see it. And when you're in love, sometimes denial becomes a kind of loyalty. A few months before all this, I had lost my job. Budget cuts, layoffs, one of those headlines you see every day now. And I remember coming home that afternoon, feeling humiliated, wondering how I was going to tell her we'd be down to one income. But when I finally told her, she didn't react the way I expected. No panic, no anger, just a quiet, distant nod, like she'd already planned for it, like she knew it was coming. That should have set off an alarm, but I mistook it for strength. I told myself she was just being supportive, trying to hold things together for both of us. But what if she had been preparing for something else entirely? What if she had plans that losing my job just accelerated? I started spending more time at home, cooking, fixing things around the house, trying to feel useful. That's when I began noticing little things. She was gone more often during the day, always with vague excuses. Running errands, she'd say. Meeting a friend. But when I asked which friend, she'd get defensive. And then there was the burner phone. I found it in the glove compartment of her car one morning when I was grabbing registration papers for insurance. It had no password, barely any apps, and just a handful of numbers in it. All unlabeled. I confronted her, and she brushed it off, said it was for emergencies. Said it was from years ago. But why keep it in the car? Why lie about it at all? I wanted to press further, but something in her eyes stopped me. Not fear. Not guilt. Something colder. Calculated. We hadn't been intimate in months, which I had chalked up to stress. But when I tried to talk about it, she'd always change the subject, bring up a bill we hadn't paid, ask if I had checked on the gutters, anything to deflect. And the truth is, I let her. Because deep down, I think I was afraid of what I might hear if she actually answered. We stopped having real conversations. It was like living with a ghost, someone who looked like the person I married, but who had slowly started to disappear. A week before the officers came, something strange happened. Our neighbor, a quiet, older man named Don who mostly kept to himself, left an envelope in our mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just our last name scrawled in uneven handwriting. Inside was a photograph. It was old, black and white, slightly faded. It showed a younger version of my wife. At least I thought it was her. Same eyes, same jawline, but the expression was unfamiliar. Hard. Distant. She was standing next to a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, tall, wearing what looked like a military uniform from the 90s. On the back of the photo, there were 3 words scribbled in red ink. Ask her why. I didn't tell her about it. I should have. But something in me said wait. See what else shows up. And then, just 2 days later, Don's house was swarming with police. The rumor was he'd had a stroke and died alone in his recliner. Natural causes, they said. But there was something off about how quickly everything got cleaned up. One moment there were flashing lights, the next his house was being cleared out like someone wanted it done fast. The day after that, I noticed my wife in the backyard long after midnight, digging. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed. That's when I made the biggest mistake. I didn't stop her. I watched her through the window like a coward, too afraid to ask what she was burying. You ever heard of the phrase gaslighting? Yeah, I had too. But I never thought I'd be living it. Little things started going missing around the house, keys, receipts, documents. And every time I mentioned it, she'd look at me like I was losing my mind. You're just stressed, she'd say. You're not sleeping enough. And she wasn't wrong. I wasn't sleeping. But that's because the more I watched her, the more I realized I didn't recognize her anymore. She had become a stranger I couldn't stop loving, even as I started to fear her. And here's where it gets murky. Because even though all signs pointed to her, her secrecy, the phone, the photograph, the garden, I couldn't help but wonder if someone was trying to set her up. Maybe Don wasn't just a lonely neighbor. Maybe he knew something. Or maybe he was trying to make me paranoid. What if that photo wasn't real? What if the person in it wasn't even her? Memory plays tricks, right? And once the seed of doubt is planted, it grows fast. Especially when you're desperate for answers. Then there was the old man who started showing up at the edge of our property. Always around dusk. Just standing there with a camera. I asked him to leave the first time. He didn't say a word, just walked away. The second time, he handed me a USB drive and disappeared. When I opened it, it was empty. Completely wiped. Like he wanted me to believe there was something on it, some kind of message or proof, only to frustrate me further. And it worked. I felt like I was being pulled into a game I didn't understand. And my wife, my sweet, careful, composed wife, was in the center of it all, wearing a mask I couldn't take off. It didn't help that she suddenly wanted to move. Out of nowhere. Said the neighborhood was changing. Said she felt unsafe. But nothing had happened to justify that. No crime. No threats. Just a vague discomfort she couldn't explain. She started packing boxes without telling me. Her clothes. Her books. Like she had made the decision weeks ago and was just waiting for the right moment. And that's when I started to feel it, that creeping sense that I was no longer in control of my own life. That someone else was writing the story, and I was just watching it unfold. You ever notice how when people lie, they get overly specific about the small things but vague about the big stuff? That's how she was. She'd tell me exactly what she had for lunch, down to the sauce on her sandwich, but when I asked where she'd been all day, it was just out. Always just out. I checked her browser history. Nothing. I checked her bank accounts. A few small withdrawals from an ATM in another city. When I asked, she said it was fraud. But she never reported it. Said the bank fixed it. But the money was still missing. I started keeping a journal. Not to spy, just to stay sane. Every time she left the house, every phone call, every strange moment, I wrote it down. And looking back now, the patterns are obvious. She was hiding something. But here's the real twist. I think someone else knew before I did. Maybe Don. Maybe the man in the photo. Maybe the officers. Because the day they arrived, they didn't ask permission. They didn't even look surprised. It was like they were confirming something they had suspected all along. And I was just the last to know. But what exactly were they confirming? And why in our garden? Why her garden? What had she buried there that could bring 3 police units, a forensic team, and silence from everyone involved? That's the question that's been keeping me up ever since. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around to find out. Because what they found down there didn't just change the story, it rewrote it entirely. And it made me question everything, including who my wife really is and whether she ever existed at all. I appreciate you still being here because what's coming next, this is the part that still messes with my head. You see, once the officers left that day, after they sealed off the garden and said nothing except that this is now part of an ongoing investigation, my wife shut down completely. She didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't ask questions. She just went silent, like someone had turned a switch inside her and the version of her I knew went offline. I tried to reach her, to hold her, to just get something out of her, but she looked right through me. And that's when I knew I was completely on my own now. Whatever this was, whatever had been buried out there, it wasn't just a mystery for the police. It was mine too. And if I wanted answers, I'd have to find them myself. But that's where things got worse. Because every time I got close to something, some new clue, some lead, some thread I could pull, something would come along and tear it out of my hands. It started with the photograph. The one Dawn left. I had put it in my nightstand, tucked behind a book where I knew no one else would look. But when I went to grab it again, it was gone. Not moved. Not misplaced. Completely gone. My wife swore she hadn't seen it, but the drawer had been cleaned out, papers rearranged, everything neat, too neat. Like someone wanted to erase even the idea that the photo had ever been there. And maybe I could have accepted that as just forgetfulness. Maybe I could have let it go. But then the USB drive disappeared too. The one the old man had given me at the edge of our property. And it didn't just vanish. The laptop I had plugged it into had been reset. Completely wiped. No browsing history, no saved files, no record of the USB ever being connected. Just a blank desktop, like it was brand new. And that's when I started to feel like someone was watching me. I started checking the cameras. We had one of those security systems with motion sensors and cloud backup. I reviewed the footage from the night before the USB went missing. At 3:27 a.m., the camera picked up movement in the backyard. But instead of video, all I got was static. A full 3 minutes of scrambled pixels and audio distortion, then it cut back to normal, just empty yard, nothing out of place. I called the company, asked if they had a backup of that timestamp. They said it was unavailable due to a server sync error. Asked if that was normal. The guy on the phone got quiet for a second, then said, "Not really." And that was it. The line went dead a minute later. That's when I started to feel it in my bones. This wasn't just about something my wife did. Someone else was involved. Someone who didn't want me putting the pieces together. And I think the worst part was I still didn't know what I was even looking for. A crime? A cover-up? A buried part of her past that someone was desperate to keep hidden? I couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even the people I used to feel safe around. Case in point, Rachel. Our neighbor across the street. She'd always been friendly with us. Brought over casseroles during the holidays, complimented our lawn, waved every time we pulled out of the driveway. But after the officers showed up, she started acting strange. Too involved. She came over the next day under the pretense of just checking in. But it fell off. She kept asking questions. Had I seen anything? Had my wife told me what was going on? Had I spoken to the officers again? It wasn't small talk. It felt like she was digging for something. Like she knew more than she was letting on. I asked her straight out, "Do you know something I don't?" And her smile faltered. Just for a second. Then she said, "Some secrets stay buried for a reason, sweetheart. Sometimes it's best to leave them there." And just like that, she walked away. I couldn't tell if that was a threat or a warning. But it rattled me. Because there was something in her tone, like she wasn't just being nosy. Like she was trying to stop me. And when I mentioned the conversation to my wife later that night, her response chilled me. She said, "Rachel talks too much. Always has." But it wasn't said with annoyance. It was said with precision. Like she was calculating something. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't sure who I was more afraid of. The people outside our house or the one inside it. Then 3 nights later, I found the journal I had been keeping, soaked through and torn, stuffed into the bathroom trash bin beneath empty shampoo bottles and tissues. Someone had tried to destroy it. The pages were warped, the ink smeared. But not all of it was unreadable. A few entries remained intact. One of them, dated a week before the police came, contained something I didn't remember writing. A sentence that sent shivers down my spine. She knows I'm starting to figure it out. And I think she's planning something. The handwriting was mine. But I have no memory of ever writing those words. And that's when I started to wonder, had I been manipulated so deeply that I was beginning to question my own memories? I needed to talk to someone who wasn't involved. Someone neutral. I called an old college friend, Matt, who worked in law enforcement in another state. We hadn't spoken in years, but he agreed to call me after his shift. When he finally did, his voice was tense. I gave him a vague version of the story, said my wife's past had caught up with her. The police had found something, but I didn't know what. And you know what he said? He told me to stop. If this involves federal jurisdiction, he said, you need to back away. They don't knock on your door unless they already have what they need. I asked what that meant if I was in danger. He paused and said, you're not the one they're watching. Then he hung up. And I haven't been able to reach him since. So now I'm left with more questions than answers. Every step I take forward, something pushes me 2 steps back. Evidence disappears. People lie. Clues contradict each other. And through it all, my wife watches me, quietly, patiently, like she's waiting to see what I'll do next. I've started recording our conversations, writing things down in places she can't find. Because I don't know who I can trust anymore. Not the neighbors. Not the officers. Not even myself. And yet, I can't stop. Because something happened. Something huge. Something that could destroy everything we built. And the scariest part is, I think it's already begun. But last night, just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, I received an anonymous letter. No return address. No signature. Just a single sentence typed in bold. Look under the tree where it all began. No explanation. No context. Just that. I don't know what tree. I don't know what it's referring to. But I have a sinking feeling that if I find the right one, I won't like what I uncover. The envelope with a cryptic message had barely left my hands before the next ripple hit, and this one came from a direction I never expected. Just 24 hours after I received that anonymous note about the tree, my sister Claire called me in a panic. She lives 2 towns over, and we haven't always been close. Life, distance, and old family wounds will do that. But her voice shook in a way I hadn't heard since our mother's funeral. She said a letter had arrived at her door too. Same lack of return address, same typewriter font. But hers didn't reference any tree. Instead, it said, tell your brother to stop digging, or we'll start digging into you. She didn't even understand what it meant, but I did. This was no longer just about my wife. Somehow, someone had started pulling at the edges of my life, threatening to unravel everything around me. And Claire, she wasn't part of this. She didn't deserve to be dragged into a game she didn't even know she was playing. But someone somewhere had decided I'd gone too far. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. I just told her to forward the letter and keep her eyes open. But inside, I was seething. Not just with fear, but with a kind of pressure that felt like it was closing in from all sides. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to cover something up. They were playing with me, toying with my desperation. And they knew exactly how to twist the knife. I couldn't figure out if the clue under the tree was bait, or if it was their way of watching me scramble. Either way, I knew I couldn't ignore it. So that night, after my wife had gone to bed, I grabbed a flashlight and a shovel and went outside to the edge of our property, where an old, gnarled tree stood near the back fence, its roots tangled like veins in the dirt. It was the only tree that had been there before we moved in. I figured if anything had been where it all began, this was it. But here's the thing, they knew I'd go looking. And someone had gotten there first. There was a shallow patch of turned earth at the base of the tree, like something had been dug up recently and then poorly reburied. My hands were trembling as I scraped away the soil. And what I found wasn't what I expected. No body. No weapon. No incriminating object. It was a shoebox, weathered, damp, but intact. Inside were Polaroids. Dozens of them. All of my wife, but younger. Different hair, different clothes, but definitely her. Some were clearly taken without her knowing, her walking down a city street, sitting on a bench, getting into a car. Others were posed, intimate. And in every one, she was with the same man, the man from the old photograph Dawn left me. But this time, they were affectionate, laughing, touching, like lovers, or something deeper. And in the last picture, at the bottom of the box, she had a black eye. My breath caught, because no part of me had ever imagined that. She had never mentioned abuse, never hinted at this man's existence. And yet here they were, frozen in time. But here's where it gets more twisted. Written on the back of that final photo, in the same red ink as before, was the name Elena. Not her name, not the one she gave me. And that's when the pit opened in my stomach. Because if that name was hers, then who the hell had I married? I stumbled back into the house, shaking, half mad with questions, but when I tried to confront her, she was already awake, sitting on the couch, like she'd been waiting. She looked at me with calm eyes, like she'd been expecting this exact moment. I held out the box, asked her what any of it meant, and all she said was, "You shouldn't have found those." No panic, no denial, just resignation. Then she stood, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door. She stayed there until morning. And when I checked later, the shoebox was gone. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Why not go to the police? Why not show them the photos, the letters, everything? But the truth is, I don't trust them. Not after how they acted the day they came. Not after the footage went missing. Not after my sister got threatened for a secret she didn't even know. And besides, if this really does involve federal jurisdiction, like Matt hinted, then going to the wrong person might just get me shut down for good. Or worse. And just when I thought things couldn't spiral any further, another layer fell open. I was going through my old voicemails, hoping to find something I'd missed, some recorded call, anything. And buried in the archives was a message from a number I didn't recognize. No name, no ID, just a woman's voice, calm, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "You're not the first," she said. "And if you keep going, you won't be the last. Ask her about Arizona." And the fire. That was it. Nothing more. No explanation. And when I called the number back, it was disconnected. Arizona. That word rang like a gunshot in my brain. We had never lived there. Never vacationed there. It had never come up in our conversations. Not even once. But when I checked our financials again, this time going back further than I had before, I found something odd. A withdrawal. 5 years ago. Large. From a branch in Flagstaff. I asked her about it once, years ago, and she said it was a mistake. A bank error. I believed her. But now I knew it was a lie. So what happened in Arizona? What fire? Who else had she been? And who was this woman who knew so much about my wife's past, enough to leave warnings in my voicemail and mailboxes in my sister's town? Everything I thought I understood was collapsing. The woman I married might not have just lied about her past. She might have rewritten it entirely. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized I wasn't just chasing answers anymore. I was being pulled toward something. Something bigger. Something dangerous. And if I kept following the trail, I wasn't sure where it would lead, or who would be left standing once I got there. It's strange how quickly a sense of safety can evaporate. One moment you're in your home, your space, your familiar comfort, and the next, every shadow feels like it's watching you. After that anonymous voicemail about Arizona and the fire, something shifted inside me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just a paranoid thought anymore. It was visceral. I started noticing things that hadn't been there before. A black sedan parked at the corner of our street for 2 nights in a row. Same car, same spot, engine still warm when I walked past it. Once, I caught a glimpse of someone inside, just a silhouette behind tinted glass, unmoving, like they wanted me to see them but not approach. I stood there for a full minute, waiting to see what they'd do. But they didn't move. Didn't flinch. When I finally turned around, they were gone. I didn't hear the engine. Didn't see brake lights. Just gone. Like they vanished into the air. But they wanted me to know they were there. And then my sister stopped answering her phone. It started with missed calls. Then unanswered texts. I tried not to panic at first. Told myself maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she turned off her phone to get away from all this madness. But after 2 days with nothing, I drove to her house. I rang the bell,
Knocked.
peered through every window. Her car was in the driveway, purse still inside, keys on the counter, lights on in the hallway, but no sign of her. And the front door had been left slightly ajar. Not enough to notice unless you were looking, but enough to let you know someone had been there. I called the local police and filed a missing person report, but the officer barely seemed interested. He asked if she had any history of mental illness, any reason she might have left on her own. I told him no, that she had received a threat, that someone had sent her a letter tied to a larger situation I was still trying to figure out. But as soon as I mentioned that, his tone changed. He told me I sounded paranoid, like I'd watched one too many crime shows. Told me they'd send a car by to do a wellness check, but that adults have a right to disappear if they want to. I wanted to scream. Claire would never just walk out on her life. Not without warning. Not without telling me something. Driving home that night, I felt the weight of everything pressing in on me. The secrets, the lies, the silences. I hadn't eaten in over a day. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Every headlight behind me felt like it was following me too closely. Every turn, every intersection. My eyes were glued to the rear-view mirror. I pulled into a gas station off the interstate just to breathe. And that's when I saw it, written in Sharpie on the back of my license plate. Stop digging. I didn't know how long it had been there. Maybe hours. Maybe days. But the message was clear, and this time it wasn't veiled. It was direct. Personal. And it meant someone had gotten close enough to my car to write it. Someone who wanted me to know they could reach me wherever I was. That night, I barely slept. I locked every door twice. Shut every curtain. Kept a baseball bat by the bed like that would do anything against someone who'd already proven they could get in and out without a sound. And the scariest part wasn't the threat itself. It was the silence that followed. My wife didn't ask why I was jumpy. She didn't seem curious when I checked the windows every 10 minutes. It was like she already knew. Like she'd accepted this as the new normal. Or maybe she was part of it. The next morning, I finally confronted her about Arizona. I didn't ease into it. I just asked, straight out, what happened in Arizona? Her face changed, but not the way I expected. She didn't go pale. She didn't deny it. Instead, her expression hardened, like a wall went up inside her, and I was no longer her husband, but someone on the outside. You don't want to know, she said.
Just that.
Flat, detached, like she was trying to protect me or threaten me. I told her I already did know. I told her about the fire, the money, the photos, the names. I even said the name Elena. And that's when she finally looked afraid. She didn't ask where I got the name. She just whispered, if you love me, you'll stop asking questions. And she walked out of the room. I wanted to believe it was fear driving her, that she was scared for me. But part of me wondered if it was fear of being caught, of whatever mask she'd carefully constructed finally slipping off. Because the deeper I dug, the more she tried to pull me back. And I wasn't sure if that was love or manipulation. Later that day, I found an old journal in a box in our attic. One I hadn't seen in years, something she'd kept when we first moved into the house. I flipped through the pages, and most of it was mundane lists, notes, random thoughts. But tucked between the pages was a newspaper clipping. A small article from a local Arizona paper, dated 7 years ago. Fire claims remote cabin. 2 dead. Arson not ruled out. No names were listed. No photo. Just a vague report about a late-night blaze, 2 unidentified bodies, and signs that accelerants may have been used. My hands trembled as I read it. Because if this really was tied to her, then there was more blood on this story than I could have ever imagined. And that wasn't all. Scribbled in the margins of that clipping, in handwriting that wasn't mine, were 3 words. It's not over. No context. No explanation. But they echoed in my mind like a scream trapped in a bottle. I sat in the attic for what felt like hours, unable to move. My world was unraveling faster than I could stitch it back together. Claire was missing. My wife might be someone else entirely. People were following me, watching me, leaving warnings in places only I would find. And yet, I still didn't have answers. Only more questions. More fear. More silence. Every truth I uncovered only led to another lie. And I couldn't tell anymore if I was the hero of the story, or just another victim who hadn't realized it yet. And then just before sunset, I got an email. No subject line. No sender. Just a single sentence in a body. You think she's the only one hiding something? That was it. And now I don't know who I should be more afraid of, my wife or myself. I stared at that email for hours. The sentence repeated in my head like a chant. You think she's the only one hiding something? And the more I thought about it, the more it wormed its way into my mind like a splinter under the skin. For so long, I'd been laser-focused on my wife, her lies, her past, the things she buried, the danger she brought into our lives. But now someone was pointing the finger back at me. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a taunt. It was a warning. Maybe even a key. But a key to what? I sat there in the dark, going over every decision I'd made since this started. Every journal entry, every conversation, every strange detail. And that's when I remembered something that hadn't made sense at the time, something I'd brushed off. When I had found that old photograph Dawn left me, I was sure I'd never seen the man beside her. I was convinced he was a stranger. But as I sat there, cross-referencing the Polaroids from the shoebox and that original picture, something shifted in my memory. Not a face, not a name, but a place. The alleyway in the background. The faded sign half visible behind them. It looked familiar. Too familiar. I pulled out an old photo album from our first year together, back when we used to actually print photos instead of just letting them rot in our phones. There it was. A trip we took during a spontaneous weekend to Santa Fe. In one photo, we were standing in front of the exact same alley. Same sign. Same bricks. Same chipped blue paint. But there was something else, something I hadn't noticed before. Behind us, in the blurred distance, was the same man. Just barely in the frame, standing at the edge of the photo, watching. My heart started pounding. I had convinced myself this man was part of her past, someone she had left behind. But what if he wasn't just tied to her? What if he'd been following us both? What if this had been going on longer than I realized, and I had missed it completely? I needed help. I needed someone outside of the storm. That's when I reached out to my old friend Matt again. The one in law enforcement who warned me to stop. His number was still dead. But I remembered he used to share everything with another guy from our college days, Trevor, who worked in cyber investigations now. We weren't close anymore, but I figured I had nothing left to lose. I sent him everything, the images, the recordings, even a copy of that email. It took him less than 2 hours to call me back, and what he said next made the floor drop out from under me. Listen carefully, Trevor said. That email? It wasn't sent through any standard server. It was routed through 6 different IPs and masked behind a military-grade anonymizer. That's not something your average stalker pulls off. And here's the kicker. The system flagged a match between the sender's metadata and someone you've emailed before.
Once.
Years ago. From your own account. I couldn't breathe. I asked him, who? He hesitated. Then said, you. My mind started spinning. I asked how that was even possible. He explained that the structure of the email, its formatting, punctuation, digital fingerprint, matched one that I had sent from my own address 5 years ago. It's like talking to yourself through time, Trevor said. Unless someone cloned your old machine or had access to it, or unless you sent it and just don't remember. That's when the bottom fell out. Because 5 years ago was around the same time as the fire in Arizona. I thought I had no connection to that it was all her past unraveling.
But now?
Now I couldn't be sure. What if there were things I'd blocked out? What if the story I was telling myself, that I was the victim in all this, wasn't entirely true? Panicked, I dug through an old box in the basement filled with documents from that time. Tax records, receipts, phone bills. And there it was. A hotel invoice from Arizona. My name on it. Dated 3 days before the fire. But here's the thing, I had no memory of that trip. None. I hadn't even realized I'd been to Arizona that year. But the paper didn't lie. And suddenly I realized neither had my wife. She never said she was in Arizona. She never confirmed the fire. I had assumed it all, built the narrative around her. Maybe because it was easier than looking inward. Maybe because it was what I wanted to believe. But what if I had been the one running from something? What if I had buried the truth so deep that even I couldn't find it until now? Then came the final blow. That night, my wife handed me a package. No words. Just a look that said she'd known this moment would come. Inside was an old, sealed envelope with my name scrawled across it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside were printed transcripts, pages of a therapy session.
Mine.
From a year after the fire. A therapist's notes. Descriptions of guilt, memory loss, flashes of fire, of screams, of a woman who looked like my wife but went by another name. I had seen someone. I had confessed to something. But the notes were vague, fragmented. Just pieces. Nothing concrete. But it meant one thing. I had known. At some point I had remembered. And then I chose to forget. I don't know what happened in Arizona. I don't know who died in that fire. Or if I was involved. Or if I covered something up. But now I don't just fear my wife's secrets. I fear mine more. Because someone out there remembers what I've forgotten. And they're watching, waiting, reminding me that I'm not the only one who's been hiding in plain sight. And the real question is no longer, who is she? It's who was I? The night it all came to a head, the sky hung heavy like it knew something was about to snap. A thunderstorm was rolling in from the west, the kind that split the sky with white fire and rattled the bones of the house. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I'd barely eaten. But I couldn't stop. Not now. The evidence, the whispers, the memories clawing their way back, it was all leading to one final point. And something inside me knew that if I didn't face it now, I might never get the chance again. The last piece fell into place that afternoon, buried in an email archive on an old external hard drive. It was a voice recording, labeled only with a date and time. When I played it, I heard myself speaking to someone. The audio was scratchy, raw, like it had been recorded without my knowledge. I was talking about Arizona, about the fire, about a woman named Elena and a man named Joseph. And most damning of all, I was asking someone if the bodies had been identified yet. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was hollow, detached, but it was unmistakably me. And for the first time, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I had been there, not as a bystander, not as a victim. I was part of whatever happened that night. And now the silence, the paranoia, the threats, they all made sense. I hadn't been digging up someone else's secrets. I'd been walking in circles around my own grave. I confronted my wife. She was sitting by the fireplace, calm as ever, like she was waiting for this moment. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just told her what I knew. She listened, unmoved, and when I finished, she asked me one question. Do you remember why? I didn't. I didn't know what had driven me to that place, what we'd run from or toward, what we'd left behind in those burning walls. But she did. And as she started to speak, the past unfurled like a curtain being ripped down. Joseph wasn't just some old lover or abusive ex. He had been my friend, my business partner, the one who introduced me to her in the first place. Back then, her name wasn't what it is now. She was Elena, confident, sharp, the kind of woman who could look through you and see the rot. We'd all gone into something together. A real estate scam. Desperate to claw our way out of debt after the 2008 crash. We'd bought a remote cabin property in Arizona and used it to funnel investor money into shell companies.
But it went bad fast.
Joseph got greedy. Started blackmailing both of us. Threatened to expose everything. Said he'd ruin us. Said he had recordings, paperwork, photos. He wasn't bluffing. The night of the fire, we went there to get it all back. Just to scare him. But something went wrong. A fight. A struggle. A gun. And then the fire. I dropped to my knees as the truth washed over me. I hadn't just been chasing ghosts. I'd been running for myself.
From what I did. From who I became.
She had stayed with me all these years not out of guilt, but out of loyalty. We had made a pact. To change our names. To start over. To forget. But something had gone wrong. Someone else had survived. And that someone had been watching. The storm hit as we argued, as the truth laid bare between us on the floor. And then the lights cut out.
Power gone.
Just darkness and the sound of the rain. That's when I heard it. Footsteps on the porch.
Slow.
Deliberate. I grabbed the bat by the door, heart pounding, and motioned for her to stay back. But she didn't. She stood beside me, calm, eyes wide open. Like she knew who it was. Like she expected them. The door creaked open slowly, not forced. Asterisk unlocked. Asterisk someone had been inside already. And then he stepped in. Older now. Burned scars across one side of his face, barely hidden beneath the hood. But unmistakable. Joseph.
Alive.
He smiled, not with warmth, but with the kind of satisfaction only someone who's been in hiding for years can wear. Took you long enough, he said, to remember. He wasn't there to kill us. That would have been easy. No, he wanted something else. Revenge wasn't about violence, it was about power. He had the evidence. All of it. The paperwork. The photos. The recordings. Even a piece of bone from the fire he'd kept for years to prove what we tried to do. He wanted us to confess.
Publicly.
He'd already uploaded fragments online. A few had gone viral. He was going to destroy us, not with fire but with exposure. We begged him to talk, to listen, to take a deal. But there was no negotiation. This wasn't about money. It was about control. About making us feel what he had felt for 7 years. Small, terrified, forgotten. And then the twist. Just as he pulled out the hard drive and set it on the table, lightning cracked and the front window shattered. A figure burst through, knocking Joseph to the ground. It was Claire.
Alive.
Shaken.
Bruised.
But alive. She had been taken. Held. Questioned. But she had escaped. She had followed the GPS ping from a backup device I didn't even know she had hidden in her car. She'd seen Joseph leaving messages. She knew he was planning something bigger. She had pieced together more than I had in weeks, using the clues I'd missed. She tackled him, pinned him down long enough for me to grab the drive. And in the chaos, the truth spilled from Joseph's mouth. He hadn't planned to hurt her. Not at first. But she got too close. She had found out something that changed everything. The bodies in the fire? One of them wasn't Joseph's accomplice. It was someone else. A woman. And the other? We had never identified it. Because it wasn't Joseph. The fire was never meant to kill anyone. But someone else had been in that cabin. And that someone might have been innocent. That's when it hit me. All this time, we thought we were covering up our own crime. But maybe Joseph had manipulated everything. Maybe he started the fire. Maybe he let us take the fall so he could vanish and build leverage. And maybe, just maybe, we were pawns in a game much bigger than we ever understood. And as the police finally arrived, called by a neighbor who heard the commotion, I looked at my wife, Adelena. And for the first time, I realized we were both victims. And monsters. And maybe, depending on what was on that drive, neither of us would ever walk away clean. But as the officers led Joseph away, smirking in silence, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A small piece of paper fell from his coat pocket. I picked it up. A receipt. From a gas station. In Flagstaff. Dated just 3 days ago. Signed with my name. And now, I have no idea if the story is over. Or just beginning. It's strange how silence feels after chaos. Not peaceful. Not healing. Just empty. After everything fell apart. After Joseph was taken away. After Claire gave her full statement to the police. After the hard drive was turned in and examined. It should have felt like the end. Like the final page had been turned. The story closed. The nightmare archived and buried. But it didn't. It felt more like waking up from a dream you're not sure you survived. For weeks, we were under investigation. The media caught wind of the story once Joseph's files started leaking, and suddenly our faces were everywhere, spliced into YouTube videos titled Secret Past Exposed, Arizona Fire Mystery Solved, and real-life criminal couple or victims of blackmail. There were podcasts speculating about our guilt, Reddit threads dissecting every detail of our marriage, TikToks showing aerial views of our house like we were characters in a true crime show no one had asked to join. And somehow, through all of it, we stayed quiet. We didn't give interviews. We didn't fight back online. We just waited for the smoke to settle and prayed that when it did, something resembling truth would still be standing. The investigation found enough in Joseph's possession to charge him with multiple counts: blackmail, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and fraud. He pled not guilty, of course, claimed the fire had been an accident and that he had only resurfaced to bring justice. But the digital trail he left behind was overwhelming. As for the fire itself, what really happened that night in Arizona, it was ultimately deemed inconclusive. The identities of the bodies were too far gone to be confirmed. One of them, they suspect, was a squatter. The other remains unknown. There's no way to know for sure whether Joseph killed anyone or if he simply capitalized on the confusion afterward. And maybe that's the cruelest part. After all the noise, all the loss, all the digging, the truth still isn't crystal clear. It's murky, complicated, and stained with every lie we told to survive. My wife, Elena, or whatever name she goes by now, was never charged. Not enough evidence. Just suspicions and scars. And I wasn't either. Turns out, forgetting might have been the most effective defense I ever had. But even though we walked free, we didn't walk away unchanged. We moved out of that house within a week. Couldn't sleep in it anymore. Couldn't look at the garden, the attic, the porch, without hearing echoes of things we tried to bury. Claire moved in with friends for a while. She doesn't talk about what Joseph did to her, and I don't press. I owe her more than I can ever repay. Not just for saving us that night, but for being the only one who saw me clearly when I was blind to myself. She still calls every other day. Sometimes she asks if I've remembered anything else. Sometimes she just wants to know if I'm okay. Most days I tell her yes. And most days I'm lying. The strangest part is learning how to be around my wife again. For so long, we existed in a fog of half-truths and silence. Now, there's nowhere left to hide. Sometimes we sit together, not saying anything, just holding the weight of what we did, what we didn't do, what we survived. I think there's love still there, some version of it, at least, but it's different now. It's not soft or simple. It's love the way people feel for someone they went to war with. A shared trauma. A bond forged through survival, not comfort. I don't know if that's enough to rebuild a life, but for now, it's enough to keep us standing. There was one last twist, though. A letter that arrived 2 weeks after Joseph's arrest. No return address. Inside was a single photo. An old one. Grainy. Black and white. It showed 3 people standing in front of that cabin in Arizona. Me, Joseph, and a third figure. A woman. Her face is turned just enough that I can't see it clearly, but something in my gut tells me I know her. Not Elena. Someone else. Maybe someone we forgot. Maybe someone we erased. On the back of the photo were 3 words. You forgot her. That was it. No explanation. No date. Just another ghost clawing its way out of the ashes. I haven't told anyone about it. Not even Claire. Not even my wife. I keep it in a drawer I never open because I don't want to know what else I buried. Not yet. So where does that leave me now? Somewhere between guilt and redemption. Between what I remember and what I never want to recall. This story was never just about my wife's secret past. It was about how easy it is to believe the lies we tell ourselves, especially when the truth is too heavy to carry. We all have things we want to forget. Mistakes we fold into silence. People we pretend we never were. But the past has a way of crawling back up through the dirt, like something still alive, still angry. And when it does, the question isn't just whether you can survive it, but whether you deserve to. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for watching, but for listening. for letting this story unfold, even when it got uncomfortable, even when it got dark. I didn't start this video to confess, or to explain, or even to be understood. I started it because I needed to finally see things clearly. And maybe, just maybe you did too. But I'll leave you with this. If you ever find something buried in your backyard, ask yourself if you really want to know what put it there. Because once you start digging, you can never unearth just part of the truth. You either bring it all into the light, or you risk becoming buried by it too.